This is the Only One Shot Golf Podcast. My name's Jim Gallagher, and I'll be your host. This is our going into our fourth year of doing this. We've had several seasons. We've had a great time with this. We appreciate everybody listening in. And 2023 is going to be a great year. We're going to have some good times together and some great guests. But I'm really excited for our next guest. We had Allison Trolio back in season 1. She's the wife of VJ Trolio, who jumps on here with me, my co-host, also the author of Only One Shot. And that's available at Amazon. A little plug there for VJ. He's a teaching professional at Old Waverly. And Allison's the mom to both Cohen, who plays for LSU, and Collins, who's signed to play at Ole Miss next year. So she's traveled to junior circuits and been there, and that mom. And we had her on to share, from her view, what a mother's view of traveling with junior golfers, some of the advice that she had for everybody, and the traveling expenses and kind of juggling that, being a mom, being a wife, and doing all that. So it was great to have her on with that and what it was like traveling with them. But today we have another guest who's not only a good player, but one of those traveling moms. Well, this is quite a treat for me. I've got Libby Pancake. She was an incredible player herself. And Tony Pancake, her husband, who's the director of golf at Crooked Stick. They're on vacation, so I'm interrupting their vacation for this. But thanks, y'all, for being with us and spending some time with us and kind of giving some of your experiences and what it's like now being parents of college players and what that process has been like. But welcome.
Thanks, Jim. Appreciate you including us, and always good to connect with somebody from our junior golf days back in Indiana.
Absolutely.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you, Libby. Let's start with you, Libby, ladies first. But you grew up in quite the golfing family. You won a couple state juniors, a state am. You're a finalist in the U.S. Junior Girls. Your sister won state juniors and ams. Your dad was a coach. What was it like for you growing up with a sister who was a good player and your dad who was a football coach, as I recall, and having that? What was it like for you growing up as a junior golfer?
Yeah, it was awesome. I grew up in French Lick, Indiana, which was a great place to grow up, very small town. My dad played every sport you can think of, literally. And I think probably had a chance to play professional baseball, but got to that point and realized he hadn't quite worked hard enough. He didn't realize what it took. And so he always said with Kelly and I that he didn't ever want us to have to feel that way. So he wanted to prepare us for college golf or golf beyond or wherever we wanted to take it, but he didn't ever want us to get to the point where we could have played and realized we didn't give it enough. And so he worked us pretty hard, but in a good way, and he was very positive, and he was just a great dad and a great coach.
Yeah, I think I talked to a lot of college coaches, and their dads have coached. Or taught or did those things. It's kind of passed on. My dad was my instructor for all those years, and it's such a great trade. I would not be – I don't like the mechanical part of it, the mechanic part of it, but I love the preparation, the strategy. I thought that was cool. Tony, for you, also an Indiana boy as well, you played college golf at Alabama. Who got you started and kind of influenced you early on in your junior golf days?
Yeah, I actually played all sports, Jim, and loved basketball by growing up in Indiana. As you know, it's a basketball crazy state, and especially back in the 70s, it was even more so that way. But so I played high school basketball, and golf was probably my second favorite sport. But as I got into it, I just loved, playing individually. And I just had such a passion for working on my golf game. I wasn't near the player that Libby was. First time we played in the tournament, we actually have a picture of the two of us standing there holding our trophies. And like the rest of the boys, I wanted to see who that cute girl was that was beating all of us. Libby won pretty much every tournament in Indiana. I'm not sure I ever won any, but I was fortunate enough to go to the University of Alabama and be on the golf team there. Again, I didn't have a good career at all, but I made some great connections that allowed me to follow my passion of golf and becoming a golf professional and a PGA member.
Yeah, you spent some time with some pretty impressive instructors. I believe Jack Lepkin was one of them, and several other guys. While you were at Alabama, you got, I think, an accounting degree, but you got your PhD in golf instruction with some of those guys. Who were some of those guys that were your early on influences you spent some time with that taught you so much while you were at Alabama and Tuscaloosa?
Yeah, I was working at the North River Yacht Club where they hosted Golf Digest instruction schools. So to be able to hang around Bob Toski and Jim Flick and Peter Costas and Hank Johnson and Jack Lumpkin, Scott Davenport, and these guys were, the list goes on and on. Davis Love was one of the instructors there as well. And to be able to watch them teach and how they motivated students, what they looked for, it just really changed my perspective on golf and how to teach golf. And I really thought I was actually going to be a full-time teacher when I graduated. But after doing that for a couple of years, I realized just the mental and physical demands of that. And I loved some of the other aspects of the game. I loved to play golf, and I loved running tournaments and just kind of being the guy that could try to help people enjoy the game more. So that naturally led me to become a head golf professional. And I still teach a lot. I especially enjoy teaching younger players, teenage junior golfers, and trying to help them realize their dreams in the game.
What makes, and like you said, junior golfers, that's where it all starts. And I'll get back to you in a second, Libby, because I got a great question to ask you. But what makes a good instructor, in your opinion, and you're doing it at that early on level, what makes a good instructor? And you were around so many great instructors.
Yeah, I think that probably the most important thing is just the connection with the student. And especially now, when we were younger, Jim, they didn't have all the technology. But now with so much technology and so much on your phone, there's probably a little bit less guesswork, and everybody's pretty much teaching the same way or looking at the same things in the golf swing. So now I would say it's a little bit more of a connection, and we've seen that with our kids. Just how certain instructors they've connected better with. Not that one was a better teacher or knew more about the golf swing. It's just more about feeling like you really connect with somebody. They're in your corner. They're your biggest fan. Some things like that I would say are probably the most important.
Absolutely. Now, Libby, we talked about instructors. We talked about you both play different sports. And I have coaches that, you see these other sports, they specialize just in the one sport. But so many more coaches in college now are looking for kids who played multiple sports. How important, what's your opinion on that, playing multiple sports and being able to even play in college up to that point? What's it like? What was it like for your kids growing up, and how important is it to play other sports?
Yeah, I think it's very important. I think there was a season when we grew up, we played multiple sports, and then there was kind of a season where there was this philosophy of specialization. And then I remember specifically when Annabelle was going on her visits, asking some coaches that very question. And by that time, it kind of swung back to they liked you playing multiple sports. I think, they like a kid that's competitive. They like a kid that knows how to play on a team. Overuse injury is an issue. And it was interesting. Annabelle had 5 concussions, 2 major, 3 minor, in a 1-year period when she was 13. So all of our kids grew up. We knew with both of us having played and Tony being in the business that they could hate golf.
Mm-hmm.
So we tried to make it really, really fun, and we encouraged them to play all different sports, and they all kind of gravitated at the end towards golf. But Annabelle kind of got forced into it because her first love was horseback riding.
Wow.
And she rode horses, and she played everything when she was little, but then it kind of came down to horses, golf, and basketball. And then she had this year where she had all these concussions, and she, that's really honestly when her golf game took off. Like Tony joked that he should pay the neurologist for telling her she probably should give up basketball and horseback riding. But I think that she is really strong, and I really wonder if some of that goes back to horseback riding and the core strengths. And so I think it's I think as a parent, my advice to parents of young kids would be to make golf super fun, because they're not going to do stuff that's not fun. It needs to be fun, and find friends, but also let them play every sport that they want to play, and then, let them decide what they're passionate about.
How were you guys able to make it fun? What were some of the things you did to kind of keep that fun part of it? Because as we all know, golf's a tough game, and it can't always be as fun. My youngest, we call her the legacy breaker because she refused to play. But she had the best golf swing. I'm going, Elizabeth, you've got the best golf swing of all four. Come on. And she goes, boring. But what were some of the things y'all did just to kind of keep it fun?
Yeah, I'd say one thing we tried to do, Jim, was to keep the kids from burning out on golf. And that kind of goes back to that playing more than one sport. And Annabelle, when she kind of was in a position where she could really only play one sport, she actually then in the wintertime started doing this show choir at her school. And I mean, it was like an off season for her. She was really into it. She loved it, but it took her away from golf for a while, and that really recharges. And, my students sometimes, I always tell them, hey, if you're trying to get a little bit better every day, that's really the way that's the long-term improvement of golf, and you really see that progress. And sometimes taking a day off or a month off, that's getting better every day because of the mental challenge of the game if you're trying to compete at a high level. So I would say we really tried to do that. We also tried to connect them with people that they could play golf with other than us. It's really no fun playing with your parents, especially if it's competitive. I mean, I think you like to compete against your parents if you can win. Annabelle can beat us now, so she loves playing against us. But I think when we were beating her, it wasn't quite as much fun for her.
Go ahead, Libby.
I would also add that when they were little, Tony was, talking more about when they were older, but when they were little, I mean, golf in our family when they were 3-4 years old would consist of 20 minutes of hitting balls. We would go get fish crackers and Coke, and then we would drive around the cart and look at turtles and squirrels, and like whatever you have to do when they're young to make them want to come back. I remember specifically Trent was swinging full swing cross-handed, and my dad was having a fit, and I was just like, Dad, let him go. Like eventually he figured it out. But if you can make it fun when they're little, they'll want to keep doing it. They don't have to be perfect when they're 4.
Yeah.
So, anyway, that was kind of the earlier version of fun in our family.
Yeah, you mentioned time off. I had a college kid plays at a top school, and I mean, he played every day this summer. You all know that schedule. And he came up to me, or he called me. He only calls me when he's desperate, I guess. But he called me and he said, Pro, I mean, I'm just struggling. I mean, I'm getting behind in school. I said, well, first of all, you're there to go to school. And that's number one. But he said, I'm afraid to take time off. I said, why? I took months off when I was in Indiana. And I think you hit it right on the head there, Tony. It kind of, not so much your physical part, it's the mental part. And I think people are afraid to take time off. And I think that's where we get in trouble, and that's where burnout comes in and everything. But, Libby, you were talking about the process of college and being recruited, and Annabelle. How has it changed from when you were being recruited? Now, you were a top player in the country. We all know that. We know your record. Everyone in Indiana knows your record there, and you're one of the top players. You're being recruited. How has that process changed back when you were being recruited versus now?
Wow. I mean, it's totally different. There were so many less players back then. It's so much more competitive now. I felt like when our kids, and we went through it with all 4 of them, by the time our kids started going through the process, I mean, you really have to sell your coaches would more find you. Of course, the whole visit, like you didn't even think about where you were going to go to college till your senior year.
Right.
We went on visits. I went on visits like January, February of my senior year. And 3 or 4 years ago, people, before they changed the rules, people were committing in the 8th grade. I mean, it's just so different now. Yeah,
and I think also, like you said, there's more in the way they recruit, the access. I think the best rule they made is to limit it down. I think Annabelle was probably under that where you had to commit early. I know Kathleen was. But they did change that where they can't contact them till their junior year. I mean, I didn't even know where my locker was in my junior year or the combination, let alone know where I was going to go to school. I think Kathleen told me it was all about colors. You got to look good to play good. So we weren't that far along either. And I think all kids are different that way, but it has really changed. But for you, Tony, you've seen it as well, and you're teaching juniors, and you hit on that a little bit with all the information, all the technical stuff out there. There's more. It seems like there's more good players because of good teaching and good equipment out there, information. How has it changed with your teaching with the juniors from when you kind of started to where you are now?
Yeah, it's so much different, Jim, as you mentioned, and the number of really good players and the competitiveness. And I mean, when we were growing up, if you could shoot in the mid 70s, you could play collegiate golf, and now it just doesn't work that way. I mean, it's funny, I get a lot of parents saying, "Hey, I went on the website and I saw that the fifth player's score at XYZ University is averaging 76.2, and my son or daughter's averaging 74 point whatever." And so they think their son or daughter can play at that school, but it really doesn't work that way. The math is different. Number one, I've had collegiate coaches tell me that if you take your high school average, you need to add 5 strokes to that to compare what it would be like at the collegiate level. And that's based on the difficulty of the course and the weather conditions that they play in. So if you're averaging 74 in high school, you're probably going to average around 79 in college. So it's just a lot different in terms of those comparisons. And also you got to keep in mind those collegiate coaches, they're not recruiting people to play in the 5 spot. They're recruiting to help them at the top of their lineup. They're looking in 2 players. So, if you're a player that's not getting recruited a lot, I wouldn't get discouraged by that, but you just got to understand, what you're up against. But as far as instructing those potential players, the game has become such a power game. When Libby was a junior golfer, she probably hit her tee shots maybe 220 yards, 225 yards. Well, Annabelle carries the ball 250 yards. I mean, she can hit it 275 or 280. It's just a totally different game. I'm embarrassed to say this, but her club head speed's faster than mine, and it drives me crazy. But when I swing as hard as I can, it's 9,900 miles an hour, and she's 102, 103, and just chuckling at me. So
yeah, get on the bus. You're on there with me.
Yeah, that's right.
I think
the game is just so much different in that regard.
You're right, and speed, and we're all hunting distance, and even at my age, I'm trying to get Callaway to send me a driver that I go further. Well, first of all, my body's not going to allow that, so that's an issue, and the fact I don't hardly play. But I think you're right. I think speed has changed, distance has changed. It. You've seen it Crooked Stick, where you're the director of golf there. How that golf course, I remember when the PGA was there. Jim Farrell, our good friend, was pro, and I'm playing there. I finished third there, and I'm thinking of some of those holes, and then like John Daly took it over corners that no one would dream about, but that's what they're doing today. And I think that's one of the things that I still think you got to get it in the hole, but it has changed the game. I watch these young men in college and even the gals, and it's just like, oh my gosh, I'm glad I'm not playing against them. I think the biggest thing you said, there's more of them. And I think that's one of the things. But y'all got married. Y'all finished up school. Tony, you went to several clubs. You were at Valhalla, I think, in your mid-20s as your first job. That had to be a pretty cool position to take at such a young age.
Yeah, it really was. I was so fortunate I was in the right place at the right time. Libby and I both grew up in southern Indiana, so to come back to Louisville was just a dream job and a chance to really they took a chance on me because I was inexperienced and young, but it gave me a chance to really learn the business with a growing membership there, and we just loved our time there. Actually, was hopeful that could have been a career job for us, but God had other things in store for our family. So then we moved to Baltimore, and I was at the Baltimore Country Club, which again is a super nice place. It was actually a 36-hole club, Tillinghast golf course. But we missed the Midwest. And Libby, I think after being there for a couple of years, she said, "Is there any clubs in the Midwest that you'd like to go to?" I said, if Jim Farrell ever retires at Crooked Stick, that would be just the perfect fit for us. And luckily enough, that all worked out for us. And it's hard to believe, but I'm starting my 20th year there this year.
Wow.
It's incredible how fast it's gone by.
Yeah, Jim was there 30. He was there and I think you were at Valhalla in 96 when I played the PGA there. And so I've been incredible, but like you said, Crooked Stick, always one of my favorite golf courses. They've had a Solheim Cup, a US Am, a Senior Open, PGA Tours BMW, and that had to be nerve-wracking running those big tournaments like that. And what was, I know I've seen and read where the Solheim Cup was one of your favorite weeks, but what goes into a prep? And you've been at Valhalla, these big events. It goes into the preparing the golf course or your operations to host such big events.
Yeah, obviously it's a great privilege to be able to participate in events like that, and I've learned so much from it. I think the main thing that I would say is there's always a group that runs tournaments at this level. So they take care of a lot of the setup of the golf course, or the selling of the hospitality, or securing all the vendors, things like that. Each tournament has different things that specifically they've asked me to do, but I think the one thing I've always tried to focus on more than anything is just being a really good ambassador for the club. And I tell my staff, hey, when we've hosted let's just say it was the 2016 BMW Championship, when people leave there, that's players, sponsors, volunteers, fans, everybody that comes to Cricket's Tech, I want them to leave and say, we've never been treated so well. This place is incredible. I wish someday I could be a member here.
Yeah.
So that's really the main focus of everything we do when we host one of those national tournaments. And, and our members are so generous to give up their golf course. We want it to be a great experience for them as well.
Yeah, and it was. And it's always is. Y'all have done. Jim Farrell did a great job. Y'all continue to do that job. And Cricket Stick was always one of my favorite courses, the course I played out of. I remember when they announced they were going to have the PGA there, and I had just kind of been on tour early on, and I said, that's my goal, is to be able to play at home in front of all those people. And I remember coming in there, and Daly was the magical story, and my friend Bruce Litsky beat me on the last hole. He made this long putt to cut me, but I remember coming in there and shooting 67 low round of the final day, hitting that little cut 6 down there on the last hole. Got about a 4-footer for birdie, and I heard someone scream, "Don't choke, don't miss it." And I'm going, come on, y'all have been behind me the whole time now. But it was just such a magical week. Mom and Dad were there. Sissy was down there, and it was just such a magical week for me to be able to play there at home. And I've always loved that golf course, and I really haven't been back enough to play. I know you've invited me several times, but it is one of my favorites, and I know you're proud to be there as well. But when I start thinking about it, Libby, you're the mom, you're traveling. Tony did the same. How were you all able to balance, all the kids and scheduling and your careers? A lot of parents out there, they don't know how to get started with their schedule for junior golf, and it can be expensive. What were some of the things, or what advice do you have for those folks trying to kind of budget things and ideas and plan, and what kind of tournaments to play in?
Yeah, what we did is we would get on we got advice from people. It was so different. Like, first of all, when the AJGA, when we started trying to look into that, I would laugh and say I felt like I needed a PhD in the AJGA because it's so different than when we play with the whole, star system and all of that. But we asked a lot of questions. We would talk to a lot of people that have been through it, other parents, because they're probably your best resource because they just went through it. And it's fresh in their mind. We would talk about different tours. I got a really great piece of advice actually at a coach's clinic once. Someone asked them about scheduling, and they said, play in some things you can win, and then go up a level and play in stuff that you're going to get your head beat in a little bit, and then figure out okay, how did my game stack up? What do I need? And go backwards. So we kind of did that with the kids, and obviously most recently Annabelle, and she probably played in the most AJGAs, but you would kind of bounce back and forth between these tours and these levels of competitiveness and just eventually work your way up. As far as, I teach a little bit, I probably a handful of mostly now high school girls and middle school girls wanting to make their team. So I just tell everybody, if you want to take lessons from me, I'm a hit or miss. I'm in and out of town a lot in the summer, so I pretty much traveled most of the time with Annabelle in the summer, and then Tony will come for a day or whatever if he can. College golf has been kind of fun for him because of being so much in the winter. He's been able to go a lot more than he ever has been in the summer. So that's been super fun.
What are you telling those girls, or what do you tell them to look for when they're looking at maybe if they can go to the next level to playing college golf? What was some of the advice you have for some of those folks?
Jim, when I meet with a prospective collegiate player, the first thing I say to them is have at least 10 schools on your list.
Okay.
And you want to have maybe a couple dream schools. If everything went perfect and, I played great this summer and could go anywhere I wanted, what would those dream schools be? And, maybe have a couple schools at the bottom end that you could be the top player at that school. Maybe that's a Division II school or a lower ranked Division I school, or whatever it might be. And then find some schools in the middle that you have a desire to go there. And it's not just about golf. As you said earlier, academics is really the whole reason you go to college. So you're going there to get a degree. You gotta enjoy that. Maybe you're somebody that really wants to go to a school that has big time sports programs, and certainly those, Power 5 conference. That's harder to play golf there for sure, but if that's important to you, then you need to pursue schools like that. So we probably focus mostly on the coach and Annabelle's relationship with the coach, or a potential player's relationship with the coach, or a reputation of the coach maybe. We looked at schedule, we looked at weather, we looked at academics, we looked at do you know anybody on the team currently? If you do, that's really a great way to get connected with a coach and a team if you already know somebody that either has played or is currently on the team there. Maybe a certain type of degree that you're pursuing. There's just so many variables that you can look at, and then you just start connecting with coaches and parents always say, well, what's the key to me getting my son or daughter noticed? And the key to that is pretty simple. You shoot low scores.
Yeah,
they shoot low scores.
Exactly.
And that's probably the key more than anything. And if your scores are in the 60s, you're going to have a lot of coaches contacting you. If your scores are in the low 70s, you're going to have less, but still a bunch. And if you're shooting in the mid 70s, you're going to have some interest. They might not be the schools that you're wanting. And the last thing I would say about this whole process, this recruiting process, is it's stressful for kids and parents, and it really shouldn't be. I mean, it's such a blessing. There are thousands of golfers out there that want to play college golf that never get recruited or don't go through that recruiting process. And if you're one that's able to go through that, I would just encourage you to enjoy it. Look at it as something that's a real blessing, and you and your parents get to go through it together, and you're going to meet some great people and visit some great places. And just look at it as a gift as opposed to turning into something that's really stressing out the family.
Yeah, that's great advice. I always tell a kid, I was a young man being recruited, and I said, you kind of, if it gets close between the two, you kind of narrow it down. If I got hurt or I didn't make a trip and I had to stay home, is this a place I could be? I'm not playing golf 24/7. Is this a place I could be? And it kind of narrows it down to that. And I think, Kathleen went through that more. Mary Langdon was kind of set on Mississippi State, but and Kathleen went to LSU. But it's tough for these kids, and like you said, score dictates where you're going to end up going. That's the true kind of measure of everything there for sure. But Tony, you've caddied for Annabelle, and I'm sure you have as well, Libby. What's that like? How do you separate dad, instructor, whatever? How do you separate those things? Because there's a lot of parents out there that want to caddy for their kids, and I've seen where it kind of goes south pretty quick.
Yeah, well, I think the best thing that's helped me in that is I've seen a lot of parents and their kids, and how challenging that relationship can become on a golf course. So I've just said, hey, I'm not going to let that happen to us. And it's so much fun for me to go out and carry her bag and to be able to spend that quality time with her. And I'll, I don't know how long I'll be able to do it, how much longer. And, but it's just, it's one of the highlights of my life. I just love being able to do it. So I'm trying not to screw it up. And Annabelle plays her best when she's having fun. So
Yeah.
we are out there having fun. We don't talk much golf while we're out there. We're talking about other things and laughing and joking. And, I'm trying to talk to the other caddies and the other players because that helps her play better too when she's connecting with the other players in the group. And, I think a lot of people saw her playing in the U.S. Women's Am, the match that she lost, and how much fun she was having with her opponent who was beating her.
Yeah, I
and
was
how much
there.
Annabelle was encouraging her. But, that's who Annabelle is, and that's how she plays her best. So that's what I try to do when I'm out there carrying the bag. So the other thing is I just try to be really positive with her and let her know how much I believe in her. I mean, when we get to a par 5, and she might be 245 yards out, carrying it over a bunker, but I'm like, hey, what do you think? She said, man, I'd love to go for it. I said, you can make it. I mean, you're one of the few people in this field that can do this. Come on, let's show everybody what you're made of. And so to encourage her that way and to be able to kind of build her up, and that is just that's so much fun for me. And most of the time she pulls it off. It's amazing.
Well, as a dad of 3 daughters, that's when your daughter hears it from your dad, they truly believe it. And that's a testament to both of you, how Annabelle was. I was amazed. She was losing the match, but having a great time. I'm going like, come on now. But both girls, I think that helped her opponent. I think that helped her relax. But that says a lot. And it is. You can be competitive, but yet you can act in a proper way. She did that week, and I know you're proud of her. And that's just who, knowing you two, I'm not surprised. That's exactly who I thought she'd be. But I know you're busy, you got your vacation, but I got a question for each one of you. Start with Libby, and I always like to ask my guests, and we talked about this earlier, what separates that elite golfer maybe from the rest? You've played against them. You were one of those elite players. What separates maybe some of the things that maybe separates them from maybe the rest?
Well, I mean, I think obviously competitiveness just in general, which goes back to the playing other sports. And I think there's a balance between competitiveness, but also not making an idol out of the game and recognizing that your self-worth is not intertwined in it, and it allows you to relax. Honestly, I pray a lot on the golf course for Annabelle, and I pray that her mind would get out of the way so her body can do what she's trained it to do. So that it's not so important that she locks up. So to me, it's a balance between a really, really competitive drive, but also recognizing that your self-worth is not wrapped up in golf.
God, that's so perfect. I just had that same conversation with a young man. I said, your game cannot dictate who you are, and you can't let it do that.
Mm-hmm.
But the praying, I did that before the Ryder Cup, before I went in there, and I'll never forget that. It's like, Lord, just give me peace. And I played Seve in the singles. I needed some serious peace, that's for sure. And he gave it to me. I mean, someone said, how did you handle the nerves? I go, I have no idea. I just was at peace. And I think that's part of it. Tony, you've seen the best. You've been at Cricket Stick long enough. You've seen the tournaments there. What's, in your opinion, separates maybe that elite player from the rest?
Yeah, it's a great question. Early on in my career, I would have said, you get focused like on golf swings and things like that, or putting. But I think that now, after being around the game so much for 40 years, it's mostly just self-belief, believing that you can pull off a shot, that you can accomplish something, believing that if you play your best, you can win. And it's hard to do that in golf because most of the time you lose. I mean, right? I mean, no matter how good you are, the majority of the time you play, you're not going to win because there's so many great players. But the best players, I think, keep that belief all along, and they're not questioning their swing. They're not questioning their short game, their putting stroke. They're just thinking that, hey, maybe I bogeyed the last hole, but I'm going to come back and I'm going to make a par birdie on the next hole. It's not that they're pressing; they're just believing that they're that good and they can compete at that high level. And one of the reasons I just say that about belief is you see a lot of players who are really good, but then maybe their game, maybe they lose their game a little bit or don't play quite as well. And I think that again goes back to that self-belief or confidence in their game. And as Libby said, the more golf becomes an idol for you, I think the harder it is to maintain that self-belief. But if it's something that you're doing because you love the game, you're passionate about it, you love to compete, then I think it's a little bit easier for folks.
Absolutely. I was a victim. I mean, I let it be kind of dictate who I was, lost a little belief in it. And, I mean, if you don't believe it, you have no chance. I think that was so well said. But I appreciate y'all spending some time with me and on your vacation. And I know you're going to enjoy some sun. And I'm going to have to bring Sissy up to Indianapolis, girls against the guys. I don't think we have a chance, Tony, but I think we need to play a little match up there at Crooked Stick.
Well, I'm going to dump Libby and get Annabelle as my partner.
Well, no, you can't do that. No, you can't do that. Libby, all right, Libby, I'll take me, you, and Sissy. We'll take those two on. We can play a fivesome. I know the
Okay,
drill.
there you go.
But no, y'all have fun.
Hey, by the way, Jim,
Go ahead.
I get to walk past the summary board of the 1991 PGA. I walk past it 10 times a day, and I get to see your name up there as a third place finisher. I can't remember what you shot. But it is really special for me to be able to see your name, being from Indiana, and how well you played in that 1991 PGA at Crooked Stick, and pretty cool to see that up there. I can't remember how much money you won, but I've got the BMW boards right by that. Third place in the BMW in 2012 was a fair amount more than third place in the PGA Championship in '91.
Yeah, I think it was about 10 times. You know, a funny story, and I'll let you go, is that next day I was flying out to Vail to play in the Jerry Ford, and I got paired with Bobby Knight. So I went from third place at the PGA to Bobby Knight. I said, for an Indiana kid, it doesn't get any better than that. So we had a great time. But I appreciate y'all spending some time with us. Good luck to Annabelle, and I know we'll see you somewhere out there on the road, and I definitely do have to come see y'all.
Sounds good.
All right. Thanks, Jim. Bye-bye.
Well, how cool is that? Libby Pancake, Tony Pancake. Libby was Libby Akers, an incredible player, as a junior player, college player. So much fun to have them on the podcast. Tony, of course, director of golf operations and clubhouse operations at Crooked Stick. He's been there, as he said, going in his 20th year. Two of the finest people you'll ever meet. Two wonderful players. That helps our listeners get some pretty good advice on not only just playing golf, but life and raising kids. I think it was such an informative podcast. But I always like to finish our podcast, whether life or golf, you may have only one shot. You got to make it count. Those folks are definitely making it count, not only in Annabelle's lives, their children's lives, but a lot of young junior girls and boys in the state of Indiana and throughout the country. But I want to say special thanks to Steve Azar for allowing us to use his music. You can get Steve's stuff at steveazar.com. And I mentioned earlier VJ Trolio's book, Only One Shot, available at Amazon. Until next time, my name's Jim Gallagher, Jr. We'll see you later.
Silver whistle and an old clipboard, a polo shirt and a pair of gray shorts in that summer haze. Remember those two-a-days, tougher than a tin